With Ohio State losing to Michigan today, Ohio State's chances seemingly look shot, but I think I can explain to you why I believe Ohio State can still make the college football playoff despite it being a long shot. There's going to be a lot of changes going on with Ohio State, and in this episode of the Deep Voice Podcast, we're going to be going over those changes and how Ohio State may still be able to get into the college football playoff. If you guys want to keep up with the Deep Voice Podcast, all the links will be in the description for you guys to follow for all the latest content and updates. If you're on Spotify, then all the links will be in the About section, and you guys can go to the links there. And without further ado, let's start off with the obvious. Ohio State lost this game against Michigan. They lost 24-30 off a Kyle McCord interception on the final drive, and he threw 2 picks. And it's not like he played generally bad, but his 2 picks were costly. Now, I will say the refs definitely let the game play out for a lot. There was a lot of missed penalties to me on both sides. Specifically, I do think Michigan did get the benefit of the more impactful penalties, where Michigan was able to convert on a 4th down, get a 1st down, and it was actually offensive pass interference because he did push off a little bit, but the defender did make a lot of contact as well. So I'm not too big on that one as much. I feel like that one was kind of like, okay, I mean, I guess both players have a case for OPI and DPI, but either way, I think the big one that I think a lot of people talk about is the very first or second touchdown, I believe, of Michigan. I think it was the second one, where a lot of people believe that Michigan did not actually score that ball. If you remember the play, he actually caught the ball, but the Ohio State defender was able to rip the ball away pretty much before he truly got control of it. Now, my honest opinion from when I watched the game, I felt like personally he did not really have possession of the ball. I don't think he had possession of it at all. And personally, I believe that should have been an interception. So I do think Michigan was kind of gifted a touchdown right there, which ultimately was the difference in this game. But at the same time, you can blame the refs, you can blame missed calls all you want. You have to look at another fact that Ohio State kind of shot themselves in the foot. When you look at the way they were playing very conservative. They were playing extremely safe this game. There was a 4th and 1 situation and they didn't go for it. And in a game against Michigan that's huge, you got to go for those. And Ohio State played extremely safe, while it looked like Michigan did exactly what they wanted to do. The Ohio State defense played a pretty overall decent enough game, but still they got pushed heavily in that last drive that Michigan was able to get. They were able to wind down a whole 7 minutes of the game, and I feel like that was in and of itself insane. Now, what are the big changes that I believe coming to Ohio State is we got to first start at the top with Ryan Day, the head coach of the Buckeyes, and I truly believe that Ohio State is probably going to fire him this year. I believe he gets fired in the offseason. I mean, you have to look at his overall statistics. I think I saw the stat. If I find the stat card, I'm going to put it up. But Ryan Day is like 50 plus wins and only 1 loss to like any other team not named Michigan. And he's 1-3 overall against Michigan. And he's 1-3 in the college football playoff. He's lost the last 3 straight to Michigan. And I heard on the broadcast right before the game started, he said that this was the type of game that, you get fired over. And I could not agree more. I believe this is especially the type of game that you get fired over. You look at Michigan and you look at how they struggled to compete with Ohio State for 8 straight games. And all of a sudden they've won 3 in a row and you've gotten 4 attempts at it. So I feel like a lot of people have been calling for Ryan Day to be fired for a long time now. And so now that he's 1-3 against Michigan, I think that you really have to think, I think this might be Ryan Day's final game or final season with Ohio State. I do think he gets fired if barring some miracle for the Buckeyes. But I do think that there's been a lot of rumors saying, will Ryan Day go to Texas A&M? I've been seeing a couple of tweets on Twitter Talking about the potential of Ryan Day maybe going to Texas A&M. Texas A&M just fired Jimbo Fisher, so they could be looking for a replacement, and Ryan Day might be the candidate that really wins that job. And I think that'd be very interesting. I do think Texas A&M is a step down from Ohio State. Plus, he is going to be in a brutal SEC, especially with them adding Texas and Oklahoma. So it is going to be interesting if he does go. And then it leads to the question, well, who's going to be the next head coach for the Buckeyes? Who does Ohio State get next to be their next head coach? And I feel like that's going to be interesting because the head coach is important, and they've got to be able to be daring, be bold in games like that. You can't be conservative against big games, big teams like that, because there was a lot on the line. Now, I will talk about why I still think Ohio State still has a chance and why I believe that loss or that game, losing it, would have been more detrimental to Michigan than it would have been to Ohio State. I have my reasons for saying that. But back to the changes, I do believe Ryan Day is probably on his way out. I could see him going to Texas A&M, and then Ohio State's gonna have to get another head coach. And then looking at the quarterback situation, Kyle McCord. When you look at him, he's not anything special. He's not spectacular. It's his first year as the full starter. And generally speaking, he did his job, limited turnovers, managing games. And I think that's ultimately what he was. He was really just a game manager and just had a very stacked team. And maybe I had a hot take. Also, follow my Twitter. The link to my personal Twitter I will put in the description below as well. So I also tweet live during the game. So I would love to chat with you guys during the game. So I made a hot take saying if CJ Stroud, because remember there was a rumor last year that CJ Stroud was thinking about staying back for his senior year at Ohio State instead of going to the draft. There was a rumor about it before he ended up declaring. And I made a hot take. I think it might have been a hot take, considering he never won the game against Michigan. I made a hot take that if CJ Stroud was on that field, big if, we're playing the if game right now. If CJ Stroud was on that field, I believe Ohio State wins this game. I feel like this would have been the best team he would have had around him, and he could have won this game because Kyle McCord gave you a chance. Now, the question is going to be, is Kyle McCord going to be your starter going into 2024? And I actually don't know. I think it's up in the air of whether or not Kyle McCord is truly going to be Ohio State's starting quarterback. He is definitely one of the more underwhelming quarterbacks that Ohio State has had in the last couple of years. Obviously, you can look at his statistics and try to paint a different picture, but you really do have to look at the eye test, look at how he's played on the field, and you can see that he doesn't seem to have like that superstar NFL caliber talent. Ohio State has had 3 NFL caliber quarterbacks back to back to back. So going down to Kyle McCord is kind of a downgrade. So obviously I think they're going to give him a shot next year, but I don't know if he's going to end up being the full-time starter. I think that you have to admit, genuinely speaking, he didn't play terrible, but he should take part of the blame for the loss. He had 2 costly turnovers, and both of them ended up coming back to bite. One ended the game. So I think that is a pretty big deal when talking about Kyle McCord. So who knows if he's going to end up being the starting quarterback next year for the Buckeyes for the full season at least. We might be looking at Ohio State having a quarterback situation, kind of like how Alabama was at the start of this year, next season. And that might put Ohio State in a very interesting spot, especially because Marvin Harrison is not going to be there. He's going to the draft. So I'm about to say he's not staying in Ohio State this year. So we're going to see what happens with the Buckeyes. Now, I want to explain now why I believe they can still make the playoff and why I think this loss to Michigan isn't as detrimental to them as it would have been. So let's go ahead and start off with the facts. Ohio State and Michigan were undefeated coming into this game. Ohio State was the number 2 team in the country. Michigan was the number 3 team in the country. So I believe that Ohio State could afford to lose this game because of their resume. I think Ohio State had a much stronger resume than Michigan. So a loss should not kill them. Like, if Ohio State beat Michigan today, that would have absolutely, in my opinion, ended Michigan's chances at a playoff. They would have no chance to get in. I think Ohio State can still get in. I don't think they drop any lower than number 6, maybe number 7. I don't think they drop that far. I think they're going to drop to like 6 or 7. So let's say in the sense that they drop to 6. They're going to need a lot to go their way. And I'm filming this as the Florida State Florida game and the Georgia Tech Georgia game is playing right now. And Washington, I called this earlier. I said Washington State would be a trap game for Washington, and it ended up being one, except Washington was able to barely win. I think in order for Ohio State to win or to get into the playoff, first you're going to need Florida State to either lose to Florida, which I also think is a trap game, or you're going to need them to lose to Louisville in the ACC title game. I think it is entirely possible Florida State loses one of these two games. Florida State loses, they're going to fall all the way back. And with Louisville losing to Kentucky today, I think that loss would hurt Florida State even more now. So now I think Florida State, they lose, you fall back, Ohio State's going to move up one. All right, so now you're going to need at least 2 teams. If you're at number 6, you're going to need at least 2 teams to lose. You're going to need Oregon or Washington to lose. They play each other on Friday in the Pac-12 title game. That's a guaranteed loss. The winner of that game is going to the playoff, while the loser is probably going to at least fall 2 spots. So if it's Florida State that falls out and Oregon's going to be sitting at number 5 right now, more than likely you actually want Oregon to lose. You probably want Washington to win that game because Oregon is going to for sure fall behind you. And if Florida State and Oregon both lose, well, now Ohio State is going to have a chance to get in. But you're also going to need to think about Texas and Alabama, who are right behind them. The committee cannot put Bama above Texas as long as they both have 1 loss. Texas beat Alabama, be allowed to pass them. So you're going to need Bama to play Georgia and lose. You probably want a Bama loss there, right? You probably want a Texas loss. You need Oklahoma State. And I would feel pretty confident that Oklahoma State can win that game. But Texas losing and Bama losing pretty much eliminates the threat of any team being put over you. And even then, I would say the argument is I wouldn't put Texas over Ohio State. I could see Bama maybe, but I couldn't put Texas over Ohio State. I think Ohio State just has a better resume than Texas. But if they did, I wouldn't even be mad. Right now, if they fell down to 7, they're going to need Texas to lose anyway. But I think Ohio State, in order for them to get in, they're going to need at least 2 to 3 teams to lose. And I think the funny thing is you're going to be guaranteed to get one of those teams to lose in Washington or Oregon. I think it's guaranteed one of those 2 teams loses. But you're probably going to want Oregon to lose. You're going to need an Oregon loss. You're going to for sure need a Florida State loss. Those are the 2 most likely. Georgia losing to Bama is probably not going to drop them out of the top 4, unfortunately. Bama winning probably gets them in. So I don't see, unless some people believe Georgia actually can fall out with a Bama loss, I don't think they're going to let Georgia fall all the way out of the top 4. I think Georgia has done enough that they can take a loss to Alabama and be fine. They'll just probably drop to number 4. So I think Georgia wins. I think Michigan's going to win. I think Florida State losing and Washington and Oregon, those are your safest bets right now, all right? Now, you really wanted Washington to lose today, because if Washington lost today, then that really opened the door, because then you'd have Washington losing and then you could have a Washington victory on Friday, then Oregon falls back. Now you're in. So there is a path that Ohio State can win and get into the playoff. They're going to need a lot to happen, and they're going to be relying on some pretty inconsistent teams to win those games. Right now, they're hoping for a Florida loss. Now, Georgia Tech is kind of hanging around. Last time I checked the score, it was 21-13. So Georgia Tech is kind of hanging around right now with Georgia. If they somehow miraculously pull off a amazing once-in-a-lifetime upset here, Georgia's falling out of that top 5. Ohio State's going to move ahead of them. I don't see why they wouldn't move Georgia to like 7, 8, or 9. I just don't know. And then if Georgia loses, it's going to be real tough for me to see why they would put an SEC team in that top 4, because Bama is going to probably be no higher than number 7. Probably, I don't even know if Bama's going to move up. They probably don't even move up. They probably stay at number 8. And then if Georgia loses to Georgia Tech, they should drop all the way down to 9 or 10. So an SEC title game between those 2 teams, I don't see how that would put any one of them. We might actually have a playoff with no SEC team, which would be insane. But Yeah, that's how I see Ohio State still making the playoff. That's how I see them still being alive in the race. As for Michigan, they don't have a resume. Michigan doesn't have a resume outside of this Ohio State game and that Penn State win. So outside of those two wins, if Michigan lost this game, they really would not, I don't know, they would kind of have the same path, but I think it would be a lot harder to put them ahead of the team, some of these teams, because of their lack of a resume, which is why I think that loss was like the worst thing for Michigan, but it didn't completely knock out Ohio State. So that's exactly why I believe the Buckeyes enjoyed this episode of the Deep Voice Podcast and want to keep up with all the latest content, then follow all the links in the description, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and follow the Spotify for all the latest podcasts and episodes. It's been Myles, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode.